Let me read it. I'm going to attempt to not have too many off-the-cuff comments. We'll see how that goes, because the, the written commentary in the sutta is just brilliant. So I'll just read it.
Starting out right away.
Judgment and wisdom, Dhammapada 19. The Buddha's words. Judging mindlessly does not define a judge. It's always interesting how powerful an initial statement like that. We are, as human beings, especially those that are rooted in self-referential views, are enamored with our judgments. And we believe that simply because we judge something as good or bad or whatever we might see it as, makes it so. And of course, as we look out on the world and our own judgments, we realize that that's just not true. Judging mindlessly does not define a judge. The wise one knows both right judgment and wrong. It's another important definition. In order for us to understand what is right judgment, and another way of saying that is right view, we have to understand what wrong judgment is, or how else would we know? How else would we be secure in our understanding of how we're living in the world? The wise judge others impartially, mindfully, and consistent with the Dhamma. The wise guard the Dhamma and are guarded by the Dhamma. I love that line. My commentary. The refined mindfulness taught by the Buddha is framed by the Eightfold Path. This refined mindfulness develops right view. Right view is a completely impersonal view of oneself and others, always consistent with the Dhamma. And that is, when we have integrated the Eightfold Path and used that as the framework for our interaction within ourselves, but also with others, we remain content, we remain conflict-free, simply because there's no way to create conflict or discontent in ourselves and others when we're framed by that gentle Eightfold Path. And that also implies that we're seeing ourselves and others clearly, the way they really are. The stress and tension and discontent in the world arises from ignorance of the way things are, at least according to the Buddha, according to the Dhamma that we're developing. And so the resolution of all of that, those harsh judgments creating constant conflict in the world, are through the Eightfold Path. And that, Nick, that is the point of this. Establishing right view, intelligent. This one can be called the judge. Simply talking often does not define wisdom, except in my case. Secure in knowledge. And again, it's such an interesting line when I hear a lot of the discourse that is classified as modern Buddhism. It seems like the economy of words is not part of that solution here. It's almost like the more you can talk and the more you can bring in all these disparate and discordant so-called Dharma practices, mold them into one, this modern Buddhism by common agreement. That's an aspect of that. And the Buddha recognized it 2,600 years ago by the teachers that he had and the representation of local dharmas during his time. Simply talking often does not define wisdom. Security, and the reason why that line has such significance to me is I spent many years in different so-called local sanghas and lineages where a lack of economy of Dhamma talk was the norm. And it almost seemed like the more things that you can introduce, let's talk about this poet and this psychiatrist and this hybrid meditation, let's bring it all together. That's what the Buddha is referring to. It's a reflection of constant grasping after something that, as the Buddha discovered, is only, it's like the carrot on a stick. You can never get there because you're always introducing ever new romantic or novel ideas, which is rooted in a mind that's ignorant of Four Noble Truths, is constantly grasping.
Even something like a simple sutta, you often see such an expansion that they can talk 2 hours on this one, and I think it confuses, because without that building and creating this ritual or impossible to reach, then you're losing the whole sight of the simple message. So I often see that the need to fill that 2 hours up is just their way to create this religion.
That's exactly it. And that is the problem, isn't it? Because that, excuse me, without the framework of the Eightfold Path as guidance for the teacher, you can get into anything, can you? Because especially if you find something that individually you found helpful, but not necessarily in bringing understanding, meaning a comfortable distraction, you want to tell the world about it, don't you? And that's what leads to that type of speculated, fabricated talk that the Buddha is referring to here. The Buddha continues, secure in knowledge, free of fear and aversion, this one can be called wise. Secure in knowledge, though, that's the foundation of it. Simply talking often does not maintain the Dhamma. In my commentary here, common during the Buddha's time, and certainly today, is a compulsion to overemphasize topical discussions such as an over-examination and analysis, or joy or bliss, or pick any topic, and making the topic itself a Dharma practice when it's simply continued distraction by over-analysis and a misguided focus on a feeling or a thought that the Buddha teaches us how to deal with. How do we deal with feelings and thought? Not through analysis, by recognizing their impermanent nature and simply coming back to the sensation of breathing, not always personalizing feelings and thoughts. The other, that over-analysis, always grasping after topical subjects, is just that. It's a way of grasping after constant distraction. It works, it mollifies people, it makes you feel like you're doing something, but it's simply more distraction, no matter how good it might make you feel. Let me go back to the beginning of that. Common during the Buddha's time, and certainly today, is the compulsion to overemphasize topical discussions while avoiding actually learning the Buddha's Dhamma. So one of the real reasons why we don't do that here, while I ask you all to keep your discussions framed by the Dhamma, it's an aspect of right speech. It's also why we run our retreats that way, is just that. This is our opportunity to integrate the Dhamma. And if we get off into other subjects, even though they might seem like they loosely related to Buddhism, we're not doing that, are we? It really is an aspect of wrong speech to, when sitting as a Dhamma, to get into anything and everything. In fact, one of the Buddha's most important directions is just that. When gathered as a Sangha, you speak only of the Dhamma. And that guides our focus here, and it guides our focus on retreats. And it works pretty well, wouldn't you say? Social interaction and social rituals then become a commonly agreed upon substitution for Dhamma practice. And I see that all the time. Or I used to see it. I don't see it at all now. This is a pervasive strategy that modern Buddhism, by common agreement, employs to continue to ignore ignorance of Four Noble Truths. And it works very well for that. The Buddha's words, hearing little but integrating Heartwood is one mindful of the Dhamma, and they are one who maintains the Dhamma. Gray hair does not define an elder or a teacher. Advanced in years, lacking Heartwood, one simply remains foolish. One who knows the truths, meaning the Four Noble Truths, mindful of restraint, of good character, gentle, in control of their thoughts, in control of their words, and in control of their deeds, the defilements vanquished, greed, aversion, and deluded thinking vanquished, awakened, this one can be called an elder and a teacher of those fit to be taught. Another interesting line. The Buddha understood, even during his time, that not everyone was fit to be taught. And that's not a harsh judgment. In fact, it's one of the most compassionate things that the Buddha taught as a teacher, to not force this onto anyone who doesn't want it. He never saw himself as a savior. He didn't see this as a salvific religion. He saw it for the very relatively few people who are actually interested in developing this understanding. And the others, he knew it was fruitless to try to change them.
It seems to me that that's making a judgment.
It can be a judgment, or it can be a simple observation. It depends on the person who's looking at that. And in the context, you bring up another good point. In the context of this, if you have developed the Eightfold Path, you have developed the proper judgment married with wisdom to make that determination. And honestly, Nick, I find myself doing that often. I have conversations with people that are interested. I just had one, I think it was Sunday afternoon, who was inquiring about taking the online study, the Truth of Happiness study. And they had some questions that led me to think they're probably not ready for this. And I asked them to give me a call rather than take their $100. And in the conversation, I realized that they just have too much resistance to this. They were already telling me about the contradictions between what they found on my website and what they already held. And I asked the simple, direct question: are you willing to let go of those beliefs? And they said no. And I said, please save your money. I was sincere. I wasn't trying to be hurtful in any way. And they took it that way. They took it in the way that was intended. Thank you for telling me. This isn't for everyone, as you have all seen. Think about the people that have come through here. Many gaining an initial excitement about what they've heard. And as they start implementing it into their lives and realizing the ramifications of what the Buddha actually taught, their disinterest grows. And that's fine. That's just the way it is. If it wasn't that way, if everybody was fit for the Dhamma, we'd be having these meetings in Madison Square Garden, for all the people. It's just not that way. And it's not supposed to be that way. I lost my place. This one can be called an elder and a teacher of those fit to be taught. My commentary: nothing determines an authentic Dhamma teacher except knowledge and understanding developed from studying and practicing the Buddha's Dhamma. Makes sense, doesn't it? Not by sophisticated rhetoric or the donning of colored robes or any other outward expression of your great Buddhist knowledge. Not by sophisticated rhetoric or the donning of colored robes does an envious and miserly impostor become a sage at peace. Harsh words, but the Buddha is simply describing that the condition of a mind of someone doing that. It's full of greed, and greed, an aspect of greed, is being miserly, isn't it? You're not freely giving of the Dhamma because you're not capable of doing that. When the Buddha talks about great generosity, his first reference to that is not giving money or even food or shelter or clothes. And that's not that we shouldn't do that, but the greatest generosity flows from sharing the authentic Dhamma, doesn't it?
I almost thought that this was a buyer beware lesson.
That's a great way of putting it.
That beware of being tricked by robes and
and fancy rhetoric and
talk.
And
that if you're not grounded in the understanding even the slightest part of right view, that you can be wasting your time.
Yeah.
Buyer beware. You need to know what's out there. And there must have been hundreds of people at that time pitching their stuff.
Oh yeah. That practical competition was just as feverish during the Buddha's time as it is today. Yeah, there was more of a, especially in that area of the world, of a value placed on seeking so-called spiritual understanding. There was more of a impetus for that than there is today. From my own experience, I came across quite a few practices that initially I was just enamored with. And because I was taking them, because I was so enamored with them, I overlooked the fact that they weren't really, excuse me, because I was so enamored with the practice and often with the people that were part of that practice, I continued to ignore the fact that it wasn't bringing me any understanding. It was just, as the Buddha mentions here, it was really just another social engagement, much like going to the Elks or going to my bowling club on Thursday nights. I mean, it literally, and I'm not, that was what it was like. And that's what that type of social interaction is something that we're conditioned to want and feel comfortable with. And so it's kind of to be expected that we would create Dhamma, or I should say Dharma practices that mirror more of that that need for social interaction than actual Dhamma practice. And that's really what I found in most of these, I would say all of the other practices that I spent some time with.
Is this the way that I should read that last line from the last sutta that you did? Therefore, what is offered to others free of craving yields abundant fruit?
Absolutely. That's what that means.
Okay.
Yeah. Again, it could say that it is a very similar teaching. And getting back to this, the overarching topic here, if we're going to judge a Dhamma practice wisely, we have to know the Dhamma practice. In simpler terms, if we want to judge the effectiveness of the teaching I just got on how to change motor oil, the oil in a car, I actually have to study that, don't I? If I study how to fix VCRs and expect it to lead me to know how to change the oil in my car, I'm lost. It's just another simple way of saying, if you want to develop something, you have to actually study that something. And in this case, the Buddha always reinforces, if you want to develop the Dhamma, you have to actually do it. You have to keep your focus on the Dhamma. Because a mind rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths, prone to distraction, is always grasping after further distraction. And even if that mind has decided, okay, now I'm going to look into some spiritual pursuits because things aren't working out for me, if it's not framed by the Eightfold Path, that mind is still grasping after this and that. And if it encounters modern Buddhism without the proper structure, it's likely going to fall into this idea of Buddhism by common agreement, meaning like an old Chinese menu, you pick 2 from column A and 2 from column B, 2 from this tradition, 2 from that tradition, 3 from that lineage, 4 from that lineage, cobble it all together and call it Dharma practice, when all it is one huge distraction. The Buddha continues, only one who has uprooted arrogance and hatred, abandoned ignorance, and developed wisdom can this one be called the sage at peace. A shaven head does not equal concentration. Dismissing the heartwood, consumed by greed, there is no concentration. One who abandons greed, aversion, and deluded thinking through non-distraction, through a jhana practice, established in jhana moment by moment, this one can be called well concentrated and a true contemplative. Of course, if you're going to do that, you have to use meditation for that single purpose of deepening jhana. My commentary. This last shows the singular importance that the Buddha placed on right meditation. I'm going to skip over the rest of that. Buddha's words, seeking alms, donning robes, mindless rituals does not define a sincere Dhamma practitioner. Only those that abandon both gaining merit, and that's such an important line because much of modern Buddhism is this topic of always gaining merit is a re-emerging distraction, and it's present in most modern Buddhist practices. And that merit usually falls on sometimes subtle ways, but sometimes not so subtle, is the most immediate way for merit is cash. But then there's other, and I'm not kidding. I mean, that's often how it's presented. And that doesn't mean we shouldn't support things that we believe in, and if it's a certain lineage. And then merit is also taught that as something that is given to you, bestowed on you in some future incarnation or non-physical establishment, if you do all the right things, the right rituals, the right way of thinking, whatever it might be. That's how we gain merit. the only merit the Buddha taught can be gained is merit, and he talks about this in other sutras, not this one, merit gained directly through developing the Eightfold Path. Only those that abandon both gaining merit and the three defilements, living always with restraint, with wisdom, this one abides, meaning abides in the Dhamma. This one can be called a Dhamma practitioner. I declare, it is not by silence does the confused and deluded, the ignorant, become a sage at peace. My commentary here. A wise Dhamma practitioner knows how to judge skillful Dhamma practice. Here the Buddha is clearly and directly teaching that avoiding his Dhamma by commonly agreed upon forced or institutionalized silence. Most every retreat you'll hear about that's Buddhist based or even mindfulness based, even loosely Hindu based, will be a silent retreat. It's an institutionalized practice that 2,600 years ago the Buddha cautioned against doing. And why? Because in forced or institutionalized silence, there is absolutely no opportunity, whether it's a 4-day or 7-day or a 10-day or a month-long retreat, to develop the Dhamma. All you're doing is encouraging wrong silence informed by wrong speech, meaning, excuse me, in order to have noble silence must be informed by right speech, meaning knowing when to practice restraint in speech is an aspect of right speech that then naturally leads to noble silence. By simply telling a group that you have to stop talking for X number of minutes, weeks, hours, months, or even years is not noble silence, is it? It's just institutionalized silence. And again, it's something, there's no opportunity to develop the Dhamma. There's no opportunity to hear the Dhamma. There's no opportunity to share the Dhamma with each other. And those of you that have been on retreat know how important that one aspect is. In fact, not even being on retreat, within our Sangha here. As I would say that as much understanding is gained in our discussions as is gained out of my mouth through the sutras directly. And I think you'd all agree with that, don't you? And I even hear that online from people that say, wow, I heard Lorna or Nick or somebody, what they said last night was so helpful. And so this carries through. This well-focused Dhamma is what the Buddha is referring to here. I'm going to skip over a little bit of that. Well, let me continue that commentary. Rather than encourage the pain of asceticism, forced silence is the same, or institutionalized silence is a form of asceticism. Asceticism is anything that we do that denies our own humanity by denying sensory involvement with the world. And so that could be restrictive eating, it could be restrictive talking, and ultimately it resolves in some type of unnatural institutionalized restriction that the Buddha practiced for quite a few years and rejected that as simply painful and not leading to the goal. Any type of that unnatural way of living in the world cannot develop an understanding of how to live in the world, can it? We simply aren't allowing ourselves the opportunity to be human beings.
Yeah, it's always seen this silence as a way to show somebody how much they waste their time in talking.
It is.
All it does for you is just completely, you get engulfed in this internal chatter.
It's painful. It is. The retreats that I've done like that, and I've talked to quite a few people after it, the best thing about them is that they come to an end. Honestly, I'm not trying to be cute or silly. And because for me and for many people, I'm sure, well, maybe, I'm not sure, but I'm allowing that some people gain benefit from that. It's not Dhamma benefit, but maybe you'll gain benefit. But for me, it was just, and that feeling until I understood the asceticism of institutionalized silence, I would blame myself. I'd leave these long retreats with the same confused, frustrated mind as when I went there. I might feel different for a few days because of just the environment. But then I blame myself. I say, geez, I can't do this. I can't meditate well enough or hard enough or with enough focus to gain the real benefit that they're telling me I should get. Well, the truth of the matter was that there was nothing else except a hybrid meditation practice married with this institutionalized silence. There was nothing else there. So what else was there to gain from it? And again, the Buddha recognized that many years ago. My commentary: rather than encourage the pain of asceticism and aversion, the Buddha taught that wisdom is developed by practicing wise restraint at the six sense base. And we talk about that often. The only place that the Dhamma can actually be practiced is at the point of contact with, first with our own thoughts, but in the world that we're living in. And especially on retreat, you would think that we would want an environment where we can explore that point of contact. And, excuse me, the only way to do that is to be mindful of right speech, whether it's here on our Sangha or on retreat. And so to practice that and to integrate it into our lives, to understand the importance and the power of being mindful of right speech. And again, would everybody agree with that? That has experience, at least experience it on retreat. And that's the point. Lorna? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Anybody there? Anybody want to comment online? Okay, I'll finish. The Buddha continues, but the wise one, able to discern the ordinary from the excellent, rejects what is evil and becomes a sage at peace. And it's evil is anything that's unskillful. He's not talking about a Lucifer-inspired evil. It's just unskillful activities in the world. Those who are able to discern both sides of the world, the foolish and the heartwood, can be called a sage at peace. Simply knowing what is heartwood and what isn't. And how do we know? How do we know what is heartwood and what's not heartwood? How do we develop that understanding? By practicing what? It just needed to be said. By practicing.
I'm just getting a bit confused.
Why? I hope I can help.
Through the Buddha's teachings, we're taught that in our thoughts, that in every word and deed, that we are thinking of our own personal anatta all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And here the Buddha's talking about, not judging maybe, but discerning people and things like that. Well, whenever you talk to people, I mean, they're just as equally wrapped up in their anatta as well. So it seems, I don't know, it seems not trustworthy to be judging other people's anatta, because their anatta is changing moment by moment, week by week, blah blah blah. It's kind of like a forever spiral that you're never going to get to the bottom of.
Wow, thank you for that, because that's a point of clarity. Here, the judgment of others is not an in-depth analytical judgment. It's simply seeing other people clearly through the prism of right view. And so again, sometimes using words is difficult. It's not a harsh judgment. It's not a critical judgment. As the Buddha says, it's an impartial observation framed by the Eightfold Path. And so that type of judgment allows us to understand people's less than skillful behavior from the point of view of ignorance, understanding that's the motivating force. I didn't really want to get into this, but maybe I will, because I thought about talking a little bit about the recent gun violence, never ending, in this framework. And so there's all kinds of solutions that people throw out. Some may work, some may not, but nothing ever gets to the root cause. And it's because of a very reactionary response to this. And some would say, how could you not? But a mind that understands the root cause of all violence, internally and externally, is ignorance. Then we can understand and not develop hatred immediate hatred for the perpetrators. I understand it. I mean, and so when I hear of things like that, and I did, I can't remember if it was Sunday or Monday anyway, now I almost always feel, maybe we should talk a little bit more about this. I feel this intense but poignant sadness that is meaningful because I don't need it to be any different. I'm not afraid of it. I'm not afraid of this. And it's a depth of sadness that I never felt before coming up to this. But it's also impartial. In other words, the perpetrators gain as much of my sympathy as the ones that are hurt. Because I understand where that type of pain comes from. To motivate a human being to think that that's somehow a reasonable act. Because it is, in their minds, that's the most reasonable thing to do, isn't it? No matter how hurtful and hateful it might be. And it's rooted in ignorance. And so you bring up such a good point. So my judgment of these two shooters wasn't hateful. It was based in reality. And it allowed me to feel this intense sadness, this poignant sadness, this meaningful sadness, without having to fall into hatred, to find someone to blame for the way they made me feel. Nobody made me feel this way. It's my own awareness and my exposure to what's occurring in the world, framed by what I'm holding in mind.
Right, but what you've just described is a blanket term you can put to anybody.
What do you mean?
That everybody is wrapped up in their own anatta, in every thought, word, and deed. So you can just put a blanket over everybody. The same blanket you put over those two shooters, you can put over everybody.
Yes, but
therefore, it all becomes kind of meaningless because you're not judging. You're just like confused by. You understand that they're wrapped up in their anatta, so judging anything is kind of pointless. Whether the good people or bad people or shooting people or horse riding or whatever they're doing. I mean, they're just all wrapped up in their own. So it's kind of a blanket. It makes like a wash of it, you know what I mean?
I do. And you know, this is called judgment married with wisdom. And so wise judgment doesn't put a blanket judgment over everything. And the Dhamma is practiced at the point of contact, meaning as things are arising. So it's not helpful to create a mindset of, from a mind rooted in ignorance, saying, "Oh, well, the world is just ignorance," because that's another way of avoiding the situation. So rather than create a mindset, a construct over that, we simply engage with, as with all things, all phenomena arising and passing away. When that type of ignorance arises, that is when we are in contact with it. So we're not carrying around a blanket view of the world, even though it's true. It's not something that is affecting our right view in the moment. It's only in the moment that it's appropriate. Does that help?
It's confusing. Yeah.
Well, and what I'm thinking too, Lorna, is that the word judgment might be what you're hanging up on as
instinct. You can put any word. Judgment, instinct, whatever.
Well, evaluation.
But it doesn't always end up with the same reaction for yourself. If you judge those shooters with sadness. I mean, the reaction there is sadness because you look at the situation and you see ignorance, and you see the pain that comes out of that ignorance. Your next encounter may be with the woman next door who's having a great time in her garden, but is still completely wrapped up with having the garden to be beautiful, and your only reaction there could be, humor.
Yes, and let me take this just a little bit further and bring a little bit more clarity to this.
Can I offer something or no?
Yeah, just let me finish this one thought. The Buddha is not so concerned with the institutionalize ignorance in the world. This sutta is really showing us how to develop the Dhamma with judgment and wisdom, and judging others wisely in relation to their Dhamma or lack of Dhamma practice. That's really the focus of this. And so as we develop the Dhamma and change our own views rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths, these blanket views of the world simply fall away. They're simply not part and parcel of an awakened human being. They're not a consideration anymore. So take this little chapter of the Dhammapada and keep it focused on an authentic Dhamma practice or an inauthentic Dhamma practice, and judging that with wisdom. In other words, in order to judge whether a Dhamma practice is effective, it needs the wisdom of the Dhamma to do that. Is that clear?
Yeah.
Good. Thank you for that. Well, Maura?
I just had wanted to say, let me just see if I can pull it up. Can you hear me okay, number one?
Yep.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Maura.
It seemed very clear to me from the first opening line and then towards the end where it said about understanding the world and the Heartwood, right? So you've got the judge, mindlessly judging doesn't define, the wise one knows both right judgment and wrong, right? So, and right judgment is, from my understanding, is anything that's framed by the Eightfold Path. It's right understanding, right intention, and so forth. We need to be able to know what is skillful and what isn't. Is there restraint? Where is there harmfulness? Is there an understanding of suffering and its causes and the abandonment of such? So it seems to me, I really appreciated this reading, and also your bringing it back to that it's at the point of contact that we're making these judgments. So I feel that it's very important to see our reactions and also to see, shooting is harm. It's comes from greed and confusion and aversion. And we need to be able to see that, and just see it as it is. And I think that equanimity holds that in place because that is somebody else's action. They are the heir of their own actions, and our, my compassion, because I know that I too am capable of very confusing, hurtful actions when they're not framed in right mindfulness and the Eightfold Path, and it's painful. So I think this is very, very clear that it is our directive to see everything that's arising in the context of the Eightfold Path, wisdom, what's Heartwood and what is not, what is of the world. So yeah, I think this particular shooting thing is also, it's just what's unfolding and it's our reaction to it. And I too like the isolation of people that drives them to mental illness and crazy thinking. So painful. But it's held in equanimity. The only responsibility I have is my reaction to it, my response to it.
Thank you. All right, let me continue. Continue with the Buddha's words. Remaining harmless to all living things, one becomes noble, including oneself. Remaining gentle to all living things, one becomes noble. It kind of answers that question.
Just asking.
Yeah. So with a mind framed by the Eightfold Path, our judgment or our evaluation or our right view of others will be a gentle view. It won't be accusatory, hateful view. And that's something that follows naturally. It's not something that we can insist on. I can't insist on having a quality of mind that I'm not fit to have. And so how do I fit myself to have that gentle, peaceful quality of mind? Everyone, through the Eightfold Path. I can't hope it. And probably all of you would identify with this. I started getting in touch with my somewhat anguished mind, frustrated mind in mid-teens. I didn't understand why. And I thought that was just the way my mind is. I'm in conflict here and there and at different times, but always kind of an underlying discontent. And I didn't understand it. I thought it was just the way that I was. And it caused me to do things that I wish I never overtly engage in violence on any other human being or any animal for that matter. But internally, I was full of conflict and full of discontent, and I had no way of understanding it. The only thing that I could do with it, and it was reaffirmed by others, was to blame myself. I'm a bad kid, or whatever it is. There's something wrong with me. Well, really, what was wrong that whole time was I didn't understand. That's all. But when you don't understand who you are in relation to the world you live in, which is everything, it's going to lead to a lot of frustration. And in some people who are maybe more influenced by things going on in society than others, it leads to this type of violence. And in some people, it leads to internal violence, such as drug addiction and other compulsive behaviors, or even just an ongoing miserableness that makes you not livable in the world.
So this gives you the insight to the 3 marks that you can dispassionately look at shooting or someone cutting you off and understand it.
Yeah, it's exactly that, except people cutting you off. They shouldn't. It is just that.
Of suffering.
Yes, and so David, and all you see, this is how it leads to a common peaceful mind. It's through knowing how to judge and evaluate what's going on realistically.
It's not that I don't care, it's just I understand a little bit better, so I don't have to be outraged at a political figure because I know that his not understanding or insight to the 3 marks and 4 noble truths, that's why they're there. So my understanding lets me view something a little bit differently than I did 3 years ago, where before I would be outraged each and every time these shootings came up. I remember Mary sitting here on Saturday, and she was like, how do we, and that's the answer.
It is. It almost sounds too simplistic, especially to a mind that is already a reaction and looking for what to do and, taking up a cause. Well, let's take up the cause of understanding. That's why I always say the most loving thing we can do for ourselves and all other sentient beings is to take to the Dhamma and awaken. It doesn't mean that I expect the whole world to do it. I don't think it will. But that's what the Buddha means by the first noble truth. In this world, dukkha occurs. That's the most profound statement ever given, because if we can truly understand that, we'll stop reacting to dukkha and learn to understand it. We'll be able to maintain a calm and peaceful mind no matter what is occurring, and including these horrible tragedies. And again, people think that if you're not reacting loudly and angrily, that you're disconnected, but it's really just the other way, because it's realistic. And again, this came up, I think, last Saturday maybe, this idea of when people start taking to the Dhamma, one of the first things when they realize the ramifications is, well, what's going to happen to me? I'm going to become an automaton. I won't feel anything at all. What's going to motivate me? How am I going to live in the world? And it's not something that could be described. You have to experience it directly. I have Pasiko. But these feelings that we tend to moderate and fabricate the own experience of it, we're now allowed to feel them deeply without the need for it to be any different. And this is something else I was thinking about, and I may try to write it out. the most overwhelming feeling of engagement with life as life unfolds often feels like sadness. And I'll explain that this way. When people are very, very sad and upset, they tend to it brings them to tears, correct? When people are very, very happy and blissful, it brings them to tears, doesn't it? It's basically the same emotion. And the emotion is a thought attached to a feeling. The emotion is tied into then a mind that is simply present with what's occurring. And it makes everything that so poignantly meaningful that it can bring you to tears. This something, just to use the judgment, something that is inherently sad or tragic and something that is inherently wonderful has the underlying feeling. But when we insist on constantly constraining our feelings to fit our views, we don't really feel anything. And when some strong feeling arises, we want to get rid of it. And some people use drink and drugs, some people use sex, some people use golf, some people use anger, some people use kicking the dog, some people use a hybridized meditation practice. And some people simply learn to be present with life as life occurs. And you've heard me say this often, that changes everything. That makes every single moment of our life what we're chasing. Meaning. Okay, how's that for a lack of commentary tonight? The Buddha's words. Remaining harmless to all living beings, one becomes noble. Remaining gentle to all living beings, one becomes noble. I read that twice. I just want to get back to it. Friends. Listen to Buddha's words, 2,600 years ago. They're still just as relevant today. Those people who say that Buddha's Dhamma isn't relevant anymore because things have changed, listen to this. Friends, don't be fooled by your practices or habits, by your sophisticated rhetoric, by your meditative superiority, or a quiet dwelling. Friends, don't be fooled by the thought that you teach those that don't know. I love that. When you are complacent, where greed, aversion, and delusion continue, here is where the Heartwood has been forgotten. My commentary. The Buddha developed the wisdom to judge appropriately, consistently, encourages Dhamma practitioners to avoid the common adaptations, accommodations, and embellishments to his Dhamma and remain focused on the Heartwood. That was the end. Remaining focused on the Heartwood. Thank you all. What a wonderful chapter. And again, it's just like all the others that the Buddha teaches. Teaching, be mindful of what it is and what it isn't, and always stay focused on the Heartwood of the Dhamma. Let's go around the room. We'll start with those online first. And I'll start at the bottom of my screen. Hello, Russ. Hello, Helen. Are you there?
Yeah, we're here. Hi.
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 Good to see you both.
Good, good. Enjoyed the class tonight. I'm still trying to be guided by the Eightfold Path, and the idea of judging anything is pretty out there for me. But I think it helps me frame how I perceive things, and that's the way I look at it. Not so much as judging, but perceiving. So, but yeah.
That's a good way. That's a less challenging word, isn't it? Perceiving.
Yeah.
That's good. How are you, Helen?
I'm fine, John. Thank you. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for asking.
Good. Again, for me, I don't have all of the entanglements of having practiced anything else. So that spares me a lot of confusion. And the Eightfold Path just makes so much sense to me. So I try to come back to that whenever I feel, whenever I have any doubt about anything.
And you have integrated it in a very skillful way. And it just works, doesn't it?
Well, I try.
Thank you. I'm glad you both could join us tonight. Hello, Mary.
Hello, John. Hello, everyone.
Hello. How are you tonight?
I'm very good, thank you. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
I think that this is very simple if we let it be simple. It seems clear, so I don't have a lot to say about it because I think it's, clearly stated what the intention is. It's consistent with the message that, it's not our role to use judgment to cause suffering for anyone else. It's our role to be at peace and return to the Eightfold Path, try to attain clear view in a difficult situation like the one you brought up, and to remain peaceful for others. If you were in a situation where there's a lot of conversation about sorry, that's my dog. There's a lot of conversation about, what's going on in the world, and it could be any topic. Doesn't have to be even the most recent events. But I think remaining calm and clear of view, but filled with discernment of the people that are around you and where their perspective might be. So I don't have really anything anything else to say. Sometimes I feel like my role in the course of the class is to try and reiterate my interpretation and understanding of what was just said, which I know that's part of it. And so that's what I have to say about it.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Mary. You always bring much to our Sangha. Hello, Maura. Hello, Maura.
Hi there. Hi again. I just so I won't reiterate that. But I also do love the last two lines. I think are also, it's just, it's another perfect example. Everybody would say the same thing of the conciseness of the Buddha's Dhamma, eloquently said, no extra words where they don't need it, something I have yet to learn. But he says two things at the end. I really like, don't be fooled by a quiet dwelling. I think that's also kind of, sometimes people think like peaceful means quiet, and that's not the case, right? So it may be the case, but it's not necessarily the case, right? Yep. And then, but I think there's also a very telling line at the end. When you are complacent, where greed, aversion, and delusion continue, here is where the Heartwood is forgotten. Yep. When you are complacent. So there's the charge here, and there's very clear guidelines about harmlessness, etc. But there is action to be done, and there is something to be done, and there is teachings that get us there, and there is a beautiful, noble Sangha that helps to put these tasks in action, and I'm much appreciative. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm glad you joined tonight. The let me go on to Jane. Hello, Jane.
Hi, John.
I'm glad you joined us tonight.
Thank you. I really appreciated the class and the discussion. What drew me to this practice is the simplicity. And, everything you need is in the Four Noble Truths, and it really does help you to connect with what's going on. I mean, anything that occurs in the world, you view it through that, and it just makes, it's calming.
That's it.
So.
Thank you, Jane. Yeah, the Dhamma is, I mean, you hear me say it all the time, it's very simple. It seems complicated only when we're trying to hold on to a fabricated view or make it fit with what the Dhamma is teaching us, because that can't be done. But the Eightfold Path is anybody can understand it, anybody can implement it, except we have that problem that Kandana recognized when he awakened. It's of conditioned thinking. But the Eightfold Path is designed to recognize and interrupt that, and it works wonderfully well. Kate, good to see you tonight.
Good to see you too. I don't think I have anything else to add. I just always enjoy hearing what everybody has to say.
Yeah, I do too.
I don't think I have anything else.
I'm glad you're here. Lorna, good evening.
Good evening. I spoke earlier, so I'll sit in noble silence.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Ram.
Good evening. This judgment that he speaks of is actually something that there's a lot of the internal workings of the Dhamma here. Because before we get to actually practice right action and right speech, right before that is always the judgment.
Mhm.
You know, how you deal with someone else and how you deal with a situation, and or how you speak about it.
Yep.
And I get to see that often, how it kind of bubbles up in my mind when I'm about to open my mouth.
That's Dhamma practice at the point of contact. That's it. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
And it's interesting to watch how that has progressed over time, and how sometimes it just goes right by the wayside. But it always it starts with that judgment of the situation and the judgment of the person in front of you.
Yeah.
Even just the whether or not this is a good time to talk about the Dhamma. Whether it's fit to be taught at that time.
Yeah.
Because it's constantly changing. But even if you're talking to the same person, there's days where you just should let it go, and there's other days where you just have that little moment where you think, you know what, this is where you could throw in a little Dhamma.
Yeah. And that's where the wisdom comes in, doesn't it? Yeah. And thank you, Ram. That is just how it works in a very practical way, which is how the Dhamma works in a practical way. So, thank you. Tim, good to see you tonight.
Good to see you, John. Good to see everybody. I think that the Buddha was pretty concise in what he was talking about in the sutta. So I thought that was pretty straightforward what he was saying. I think this thing on judgment, though, is a rabbit hole, because I was reading some of the Pali Canon over the weekend, and Buddha said something, and I don't know to the context, but he was talking in the context of the Four Noble Truths, where he talked about gratification, danger, and escape. And gratification, and then the danger of getting gratified creates the dukkha, and then escape with the Eightfold Path, which is a middle way, right?
Yeah.
Which is a lack of extremes, whether it's what Buddha did in his earlier life, and being a wealthy young man, and then being somebody who could see his spine through his stomach and almost died. And so when I think about judgment, I just feel that the judging others, and when you judge yourself, brings upon a massive amount of dukkha. I know when I judge myself, it's my worst enemy. It's a horrible thing to do.
Debilitating.
So going back to the Eightfold Path, centers and allows us to do that. So when I try to avoid watching the news, and I got rid of all my social media months and months and months ago, because those are things that are happening all the time. Right now, as we speak, somewhere in the world, something horrible is happening. Because with human beings, there's dukkha, and there always has been, and always will be.
Yep.
And to follow the proper Dhamma And I think that's what he was trying to say in that sutta, that there are certain Dhamma practices that don't allow you to follow that Eightfold Path, that middle way, to gain peace and tranquility and joy.
Yeah, boy, well said, Tim. That's exactly it. And so it's found within the framework of the Eightfold Path. And you use the word danger. There's other places where the Buddha talks about the danger of judging without that framework, because it can only create conflict. It's just that way. Thank you. David, good to see you tonight.
I'm all set.
I'm glad you're here. Mary Beth, good to see you tonight.
I just wanted to, I had something rattling around in my head from when Lorna was talking, and a particular phrase, Lorna said something like, well, if blah, 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 then isn't it all just meaningless? And I thought, well, first, like, I think what I heard you saying was like meaningless, like it doesn't matter, like, well, then what's the point? But then it occurred to me, like, yes, exactly. Then it's meaningless. Then it like it's like the taking away of all the meaning that we put on. I mean, there's a shooter, and clearly that person, it's not easy to do what John talked about, which is to see that it's some polluted states, and the sadness that someone could. But if you can, then every person's going to make up some different meaning. And we get all arguments. Is it that there's mental health problems? Is it that there's, not enough gun control? Is it that they have bad parents? Is it that, the world's like just terrible now? And, so I just wanted to share that clarity that gave me just hearing you say that phrase of like, like if we can, drop away whatever our meaning is, whether it's fear that we, that builds up, or judgment and condemnation of this person and that person, and politicians or whatever, that there can be some peace there.
Yeah, great insight, Mary Beth, and that it's just that way. And so in that way, it left you with a peaceful mind, seeing it that way.
Yeah.
And that's where we can be productive, and maybe at some point really address this. We certainly can't legislate it away with reactionary ideas or blaming people, either whether individuals or just blame all politicians. That gets us nowhere. So it is meaningless in that way. There's no real useful meaning.
Not personal.
Yeah, and again, I don't want to get too deep into it, but just as you saw it, it is just that way. Thank you. Bonnie, good to see you tonight.
Just to see you too. So in order for me to understand the idea of the use of the word judgment, I think of it as it's a system of almost, it's like a non-judgmental critique, which really employs the first of the Eightfold Path. So it's like a field of view, which allows me to see, or I work to see, and find, right effort and action and intention to see it as much as it is as it is, so that you can be in the middle, or to be able to see it as clearly as possible. And actually, for me, it feels like it's without judgment by looking at what it is, right? So the judgment is sort of in a non-judgmental way, by being able to see clearly in a way, right?
No,
read how to read to see the truth, or the clarity that can be there.
Yes.
With right view.
With
Yes,
right view,
yes,
with
yes.
with judgment married with wisdom. The judgment isn't looking to place blame on anyone or anything or any institution. It's simply It's simply judging things clearly in relation to reality, in relation to the Four Noble Truths. And that leaves a mind free of conflict, and it leaves a mind free of the compulsive need to find blame. Because a mind that understands how all this arises naturally won't start looking for blame, because it knows it's not a matter of blame. It's simply a matter of recognizing what's here. And then we can get into the long discussion about what should we do as a society, but that's something else. And I would say, and within this room, not to be too simplistic, if we really want to end violence in the world, end conflict in the world, we'll find a way to end conflict within ourselves first. And then it naturally will end. And it won't, not to make a blanket statement, but I think history has proven it, it won't end any other way. We've been trying since the beginning of human history to manage and legislate against any type of pain and suffering, any type of unfairness in the world. It simply can't be done in a world that's rooted in ignorance. And that shouldn't be taken as kind of reacting to that. It shouldn't be taken as a negative way, or even another level of disconcertment. It's not. It shouldn't lead us to hopelessness, because the hope is within the Dhamma, and we have it here. It's still present today. It still works. And if we get past the conditioned notion that we should be all saviors in the world, because we can't be, that's something else that the Buddha recognized and addressed, whether we see that in ourselves or not. The idea that we can fix dukkha is a salvific view. Other than recognizing the fix is ending ignorance. But again, the only person that I can influence as far as ending ignorance is myself. And then in the role that we have and in the Sangha, we can help, we can support each other in doing that. But that's really as far as we go. But that's enough. In fact, if we try to do more than that, we're going to get lost again in greed, aversion, and deluded thinking. Nick, good to see you tonight.
Good to be here. I don't have any comments today.
I'm glad you're here. Wow, what a wonderful class. I'm glad I thought about this before, whether we should touch on the shootings and that type of thing. And I think every now and then, not every now and then, when situations like that arise, these real tragedies, engaging in right speech in the framework of the Eightfold Path within our Sangha, I think is important to do. We're all mindful if we didn't look at these things without getting into who's right, who's wrong, what we should do as far as, all the rest of it. But just to recognize that these things occur in the world as from the point of view of a Dhamma practitioner, from a lack of understanding.
I have noticed, looking back over the discussions that we've had over the last few years, this has been happening over the last few years, that our discussions of this subject in particular has gotten much wiser.
Yeah, I think maybe because your teacher got a little wiser about it.
Well, it may have had something to do with it, but the reaction of the Sangha as well has been, with much more judgment.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And it's because collectively as a Sangha, we're developing the Dhamma. And so it should be this way. We are seeing these things in a way that doesn't cause us to personalize them and react to them out of anger and fear and frustration and all the rest of it. We're able to, in a very literal way, we don't lose our minds over these things.
Because I've seen and heard some really deep dismay about these things happening in the past. And
I mean, within our Sangha.
Within our
Yep.
Sangha, yeah.
Because even if you want to be a Buddhist warrior, it's got to be framed by the Eightfold Path.
That's a true warrior, isn't it?
That takes you into that discussion outside of this room with that framework. You can't go in with blind anger, because what good does that do? It's just, it's happened 212 times in the last, couple of years. So, you have to have a framework, and this framework is a simple framework, but it really does right speech, right thoughts, and it's something to.
In the aftermath, although the understanding isn't in place to do this as a society, but if we could, and I'm not talking that that somebody should come in and teach the survivors the Dhamma or how to meditate, but to approach people from a non-judgmental, non-personal, non-blaming point of view can then at least lead to maybe some resolution, or at least help to develop some peace of mind.
At least one less ripple in the pond.
Yeah, and that one less ripple can have a huge effect across the world. And I think we do that as we regain control of our minds. We stop contributing to the conflict in the world. It's just that way, and that little elimination of that one ripple has a powerful effect. It just does.
It doesn't mean you're not engaged.
Yeah.
It means you're engaged skillfully.
Skillfully. And again, going back to that, then every moment is meaningful. The people often talk about the search for meaning. And again, if that search is outside of themselves and speculative ideas and ideologies, it's always going to be disappointing. But if we learn to practice restraint at the point of contact, unite our minds and our bodies, live in a impersonal way, then every moment is meaningful. Nick, you had your hand up?
Yeah, well, it's got something to do with the shooting one. I just, I don't know, it doesn't tie in with anything. It just, listening to the news this morning, and they interviewed 3 of the classmates of one of the shooters. And they all said, oh, yeah, well, he was always talking about shooting people. Yeah, we know. Yeah, we had a list of people he wanted to kill. I said, did you think that you should have brought that up to somebody's attention?
Yeah, you would think so, except it's the nature of a mind rooted in ignorance to ignore its own ignorance and ignore its own surroundings. I would say that the thought and the motivation to do that simply isn't present in most people. It just isn't. It's a mind that is constantly distracted, just doesn't think of a practical thing, or even addressing that when you know it. I mean, think about, this is part of that poignant sadness. Think about a young man growing up with a mind like that is just consumed with that type of hatred and anger that he was conditioned to think. And again, and it doesn't go back into, well, maybe there was something wrong with his childhood or this or that. Maybe there was. The important thing is to recognize what occurred out of a mind rooted in ignorance.
And a surrounding that did not see that as extremely alarming.
Well, and another, what I was saying is, because you don't know the right thing to do, you really don't know anything to do, and so you don't. So what do you kind of, continuing to ignore ignorance is the same thing as that sticking your head in the sand. What's that, ostrich with his head in? Yeah, I mean, it really is the same thing. And so you're incapable of saying, here's a young man in crisis, let's do something for him. And what we might do probably isn't going to be very helpful either. But if we can find a way to intervene mindfully, perhaps, that's one part of the puzzle, I think, but I don't want to get into that because we can end up in that. The point is, 2,600 years ago, Siddhartha Gautama spent 6 years trying to figure out all these mass killings of his time by swords and chariots and hangings and cutting people's heads off. It was just as common back then. They just didn't have guns, but there was a lot of violence, a lot of death, a lot of blood. And he never, even as a prince in his father's kingdom, or even afterwards, he never got up and said, stop, because he knew that was impossible. The world's most brilliant thinker, the world's most compassionate human being, taught a Dhamma to end violence. And I think he accomplished it, at least as far as that could go. And we've contributed a great deal to the end of conflict and violence with our own Dhamma practice. And we should feel pretty good about that. We should, not in an arrogant way. We should. People talk about being part of the solution rather than a problem. This is the way of doing that in a profound way. Because being part of the problem is continuing ignorance. And anyway. Didn't I start this off?
John, can I just add?
Yes.
Can I add one thing? I
Sure.
think what you said about ignorance, yes, it's ignoring, okay, we know that, I don't want to deal with that. But laced around that are the other poisons, of course, because there's aversion to an unpleasant outcome, that if somebody says something that doesn't fall favorably on, you know, we're so attached to staying comfortable, right? We're confused about the causes of true happiness, and acting out of an intentional, ethical, wise way. And I think your point is very good, that people, if you don't know different, you can't do different, right? And I also see those factors at play. Like, I'm not going to get myself involved in this because it might cause me some pain that I think I can't feel.
Yeah. Well said. Great class. We'll finish with Metta. The one other thing I want to mention tonight, I've been a little bit, tardy to the word out about the next retreat. I'm going to send an email out Wednesday. I like to get it out 3 months before, but this is only 2.5 months before. But if you're going to join us on retreat, please sign up as soon as you can, because it helps greatly with my planning. It doesn't mean you can't sign up the day before, but if you're going and you know you're going, please sign up as soon as you can. I would greatly appreciate it. We'll finish tonight with Metta, as we always do. So find your relaxed meditation posture, and gently close your eyes, gently close your mouths, and take a moment to become mindful of your in-breath and your out-breath. And these are the words of the Buddha from the Karaniya Metta Sutta. This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm and wise and skillful, not proud or demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove. Wishing and gladness and in safety, may all beings be at ease. Whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short, or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born, may all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another. Even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings. Radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths, outwards and unbounded, freed from hatred and ill will. Whether standing or walking, seated or lying down, free from drowsiness, one should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding. By not holding to fixed views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desires, is not born again into this world. Thank you all for a wonderful class tonight. Thank you all for joining online.
Thank you, John.
Take care.
Thank you, John.